You've probably met someone like this. Someone who receives criticism without flinching. Someone who hears devastating news and their face barely changes. Someone who remains unnervingly calm when everyone around them is losing composure. They don't argue. They don't defend. They don't visibly process emotion in the moment. They just exist in stillness. And if you're someone who reacts to everything, who feels emotions intensely and shows them immediately, these people can seem almost alien. Are they suppressing everything? Are they secretly suffering? Or have they discovered something about emotional regulation that the rest of us haven't? The psychology of people who never react is more complex than it appears. And understanding it reveals something important about emotional intelligence, self-protection, and the cost of appearing unshakable. What non-reactivity actually is. First, we need to clarify what we mean by never reacting, because there's a difference between someone who processes emotions internally and someone who's dissociated from their feelings entirely. True non-reactivity isn't about feeling nothing. It's about creating space between stimulus and response. When something happens, someone insults you, disappoints you, challenges you, there's a moment where you could react immediately, or you could pause. Non-reactive people have mastered the pause. This often gets confused with emotional suppression, but they're not the same thing. Suppression is pushing feelings down, denying they exist, refusing to acknowledge them even to yourself. Non-reactivity is acknowledging the feeling privately while choosing not to express it externally in the moment. The distinction matters because suppression is psychologically harmful. It's associated with increased anxiety, depression, and even physical health problems. Non-reactivity, when done consciously, can be a form of emotional regulation, a skill that allows you to respond rather than react. But here's where it gets complicated. Sometimes what looks like healthy emotional regulation is actually trauma response. Sometimes the calm is real mastery. Sometimes it's freeze response. And from the outside, they can look identical. Non-reactive people typically share certain characteristics. They're observational. They watch situations unfold before inserting themselves. They're comfortable with silence. They don't feel compelled to fill empty space with reactions or commentary. They're selective about which battles matter. They've internalized that not everything requires a response. And they've usually learned, through experience, that immediate reactions rarely serve them well. The origins of non-reactivity. Non-reactivity doesn't emerge from nowhere. It's usually cultivated, either deliberately or as an adaptation to environment. For some people, it's a learned skill. They've noticed that their reactive tendencies, getting angry quickly, showing hurt immediately, responding defensively, created problems in their relationships or careers. So they consciously developed the ability to pause, to create that space between what happens and how they respond. This is emotional intelligence in action. For others, non-reactivity is a trauma response. If you grew up in an environment where showing emotion was dangerous, where anger was met with violence, where sadness was dismissed, where fear was exploited, you learned to control your external presentation as a survival mechanism. Your face became a mask. Your stillness became armor. Children who grow up walking on eggshells around volatile parents often develop this. They learn to read the room with extraordinary precision. They learn that their emotional displays can trigger unpredictable consequences, so they learn to go flat, to become unreadable, to protect themselves through non-reaction. There's also a cultural dimension. Some cultures valorize emotional restraint as a virtue. Stoicism, for instance, teaches that we can't control external events, only our responses to them. Eastern philosophies often emphasize detachment from emotional turbulence. If you were raised in an environment that rewarded composure and discouraged emotional display, non-reactivity becomes your baseline. Personality plays a role too. Some people are naturally less emotionally expressive. They feel things deeply, but their internal experience doesn't automatically translate to external display. They're not performing calmness, they simply process differently. The key is understanding which origin applies. Because non-reactivity that comes from conscious choice and emotional maturity serves you. Non-reactivity that comes from fear or dissociation doesn't. It just looks like it does. The psychology behind the calm. So what's actually happening in the mind of someone who doesn't react? What are the psychological mechanisms at work? One component is something called cognitive reappraisal. This is the ability to reframe a situation in a way that changes its emotional impact. If someone criticizes you, a reactive person might immediately feel attacked and respond defensively. A non-reactive person might reframe it. This person is having a bad day, or this criticism might have a valid point one should consider, or even this person's opinion doesn't define my worth. They're not denying the criticism happened. They're changing their relationship to it. This happens quickly, often automatically, in people who practice it regularly. There's also what psychologists call distress tolerance. This is the capacity to experience uncomfortable emotions without needing to immediately escape or neutralize them. Most people have very low distress tolerance. They feel anger and need to express it. They feel hurt and need to show it. Non-reactive people have developed the capacity to sit with discomfort without needing immediate relief. Another factor is reduced ego investment. Reactive people often react because their sense of self feels threatened. An insult isn't just words, it's an attack on identity. A disappointment isn't just an event, it's a referendum on their worth. Non-reactive people have often decoupled their self-worth from external validation or circumstances. They're less defended because there's less self to defend. They've also typically developed strong metacognitive awareness. They can observe their own emotional responses as they happen. There's a part of them that can think, I'm feeling angry right now, while another part remains separate from that anger, watching it arise without being consumed by it. This creates psychological distance. You're not your anger. You're the person experiencing anger. That distinction gives you choice. But here's the shadow side. Sometimes what looks like distress tolerance is actually dissociation. Sometimes what looks like detachment is actually disconnection from self. The same mechanisms that create healthy non-reactivity can also create unhealthy emotional numbing. The advantages of non-reactivity. There are genuine advantages to being someone who doesn't react immediately. And understanding them helps explain why some people cultivate this trait deliberately. The first advantage is relational. Non-reactive people are harder to manipulate. If someone is trying to provoke you, it arise out of you. Push your buttons to gain power in an interaction. They can't succeed if you don't react. Your stillness becomes a form of power. They lose the leverage they were seeking. This is particularly valuable in toxic relationships or workplace dynamics. The colleague who makes passive-aggressive comments to see if you'll snap. The family member who knows exactly which topics trigger you. The person who uses your emotional volatility against you. Non-reactivity neutralizes these tactics. Second, non-reactive people make better decisions. When you're flooded with emotion, anger, fear, hurt, your prefrontal cortex goes partially offline. You're literally less capable of rational thought. By creating space before responding, non-reactive people give their nervous system time to settle, which allows them to engage the parts of their brain responsible for judgment and planning. They also preserve energy. Reacting to everything is exhausting. Every provocation, every disappointment, every piece of bad news becomes an event that demands your emotional resources. Non-reactive people conserve that energy. They're selective about what gets their attention and investment. There's also a kind of freedom in it. When you're not constantly buffeted by external circumstances, when you're not at the mercy of how other people behave or what situations arise, you reclaim a sense of agency. You're responding to life from a place of choice rather than compulsion. And there's dignity in composure. Non-reactive people rarely say things they regret. They rarely burn bridges unnecessarily. They rarely escalate situations, that could have been de-escalated. Their restraint protects them from the consequences of emotional impulsivity. These advantages are real, but they come with costs that aren't always visible. The costs of non-reactivity, because here's what most people don't see about those who never react. The internal experience can be completely different from the external presentation. The first cost is relational misunderstanding. People often interpret non-reactivity as not caring. If you don't show visible emotion when someone shares difficult news, they might think you're indifferent. If you don't react to criticism, people might think it didn't affect you. If you remain calm during conflict, others might feel like you're not taking it seriously. This creates a gap. You might be feeling everything intensely while appearing to feel nothing. And that gap can damage relationships. People need to see that they matter to you, that their words land, that you're emotionally present. If your non-reactivity is mistaken for detachment, you can seem cold when you're actually just controlled. Second, there's the internal accumulation. Just because you're not reacting doesn't mean the emotion disappears. If you're not processing it in some other way through journaling, therapy, physical activity, creative expression, it accumulates. Non-reactive people often carry enormous internal pressure that no one sees. They're composed on the outside while experiencing a storm within. This can lead to sudden overwhelm. You manage 100 things with perfect calm, and then something small happens and you completely fall apart. It looks disproportionate to observers, but it's not about that one thing. It's about the accumulated weight of everything you didn't react to. Third, non-reactivity can become a prison. If you've built an identity around being the calm one, the reliable one, the person who never breaks, you lose permission to have needs or show vulnerability. People come to expect your composure. They depend on it, and you feel trapped by the role you've created. There's also the risk of emotional atrophy. Emotions are like muscles. If you never use them, never express them, never let them move through you, you can lose access to them. What started as conscious regulation can become involuntary numbness. You wanted to control when you showed emotion, but now you struggle to feel emotion at all. And perhaps most importantly, chronic non-reactivity can prevent necessary confrontation. Some things need to be addressed. Some boundaries need to be defended. Some relationships need conflict to evolve. If you never react, you might avoid important conversations, tolerate unacceptable behavior, or sacrifice your needs to maintain external peace. The composure that protects you can also trap you. Finding the balance. So what's the answer? Should you react more? React less? The goal isn't to land on one side or the other. It's to develop what we might call flexible emotional regulation. This means being capable of both. You can choose stillness when it serves you, when reacting would escalate unnecessarily, when you need time to think, when the situation doesn't warrant your emotional energy. And you can choose expression when it serves you, when relationships need emotional honesty, when boundaries need defending, when your needs deserve articulation. The key is consciousness. Are you choosing not to react, or are you incapable of reacting? Are you regulating emotion or suppressing it? Are you creating space for wise response or avoiding necessary confrontation? Healthy non-reactivity includes several components. First, private processing. If you're not reacting externally, you need another outlet. This might be therapy, journaling, talking to trusted friends, physical exercise, some way to metabolize the emotions that you're not expressing in the moment. Second, selective vulnerability. You can be generally non-reactive while still showing emotion in safe relationships. You don't have to perform composure with everyone. The people closest to you deserve to see your interior life, even if the rest of the world doesn't. Third, clear communication. If you tend toward non-reactivity, you may need to verbalize what you're feeling since it's not visible on your face. I'm not reacting because I'm processing this, not because I don't care. This helps prevent the relational misunderstandings that plague non-reactive people. Fourth, periodic assessment. Check in with yourself. Are you still feeling things deeply? Are you still capable of spontaneous joy, righteous anger, appropriate fear? If everything has become muted, if you're not just non-reactive but non-feeling, that's a sign you've crossed into unhealthy territory. And finally, permission to react. You're allowed to show anger when something is wrong. You're allowed to cry when something hurts. You're allowed to laugh loudly when something delights you. Mastery isn't about never reacting. It's about choosing when to react and when not to. The goal is agency, not suppression. Conclusion: people who never react aren't emotionless. They're not unaffected. They're not necessarily more evolved or emotionally mature than people who react freely. They've simply developed, whether through choice, trauma, or temperament, a different relationship with emotional expression. Sometimes that serves them. Sometimes it costs them. Often it does both simultaneously. If you're someone who reacts to everything, there's wisdom in learning to pause, to create space, to develop distress tolerance. And if you're someone who never reacts, there's wisdom in occasionally letting yourself be visible, messy, and honest about what you're feeling. The stillness can be strength, but so can the willingness to break it. The psychology of people who never react isn't about being invulnerable. It's about understanding that composure is a choice, not a character trait. And like all choices, it serves you best when you remain free to choose differently.